Hello. Good morning, everybody. There we go. Morning. Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
We'll give it a second for people to join us. This is a good chapter. I wish we were in the classroom. I have lots of fun memory things to do, but we're not. Morning. Charles, I check email Outlook every day. All right, everybody's getting there. We got a few. We'll wait a couple more minutes for a few more people. All righty. It's 9:35, so we'll get going. So hopefully everybody was able to complete their week 2, which involves the study plan, which was learning, the quiz, which was learning, and then the discussion. A good percentage of you guys did not complete all 3 parts again. You had to do your initial post. You had to write on 2 other people's posts and then go back at the end of the week to your own post and comment on what somebody else wrote for you. If somebody didn't write on your post, which most likely has to do with the fact that you started doing the whole process on like Friday or Saturday, then you still have to write on your own post to discuss stuff so it all gets done. So you have to do all 3 parts to get all of the credit for the discussion. The other thing that was added was the journal, which again sounds like more work per week. But I promise you, it is better than a cumulative final. So really, honestly, do the journal and be happy you're doing the journal versus the trying to study 14 weeks worth of stuff for a test. So for the journal, you needed to set your goals, do week 1 and week 2. That was a lot last week, but you'll just be doing 1 journal entry a week going forward. So hopefully you guys did not have too much of a problem with that. I wanted to show you guys a cute video that I forgot to show you about learning last week. There's no sound, so I don't need to enable sound, but this is the typical example of observational learning. And I'm sure a majority of you guys have seen this on TikTok already, but it's about a child who has watched her parents hand sanitize, and possibly she's been hand sanitizing, though they don't recommend it for little ones because of the alcohol content. But so let's just go with that her parents hand sanitize a lot. And so you have a toddler who thinks everything is a hand sanitizer because that's what she knows. So here's a quick video. So every little thing that she sees, she puts her hand by it and she rubs because that's what she sees. Am I right? Like, isn't that so like observational learning at its best? Like this little kid who doesn't know what the word hand sanitizing knows exactly what to do. It's crazy. So let's jump into week 3 now. All right. Week 3 is about memory. This week we're going to do memory. Memory, you have your study plan, which is basically reading the textbook. Now, for everybody who's been, I got a lot of emails in the last couple days about the textbook. So there's not a textbook per se, it's a code. The code is going to be input into this Waymaker when you can put it in at any point when it prompts you. But after this week, you are not going to be allowed to take the quizzes if you do not have your code that you bought from the bookstore or up here. You can order your access code up here. And this is the last week that you're going to have access to take the quizzes until you have that access code. So next week, don't send me an email. I can't take the quizzes because I'm going to say, do you have your access code? Like we talked about the last 3 weeks. You put it in there because it gives you access. That's why it's called an access code. So you have access to the quizzes. If you don't have the code, you don't take the quizzes, you are not getting grades. You're getting zeros. And I don't think you can pass the class with all zeros of quizzes. So you're going to do your study plan. You're going to do your quiz. And then this week's post is not a discussion post. This week is an assignment. So this is different. What that means is you are going to do a 200 to 400 word writing It's not a discussion post. You're not commenting on other people. So it's a letter you're writing to somebody. You're writing a letter to your friend. It says, imagine one of your best friends is struggling with his classes. He wants to do well, but you learn that he does all these things that he probably shouldn't be doing. You need to write an email to your friend between 200 to 400 words explaining to him why his study habits are ineffective and what he should do to improve his learning. Include appropriate vocabulary from this module on memory, as well as things you learned about consciousness and problem solving. If you haven't, that's fine. Okay, so you are writing a 200 to 400 page letter to a friend about this. Questions? No? Okay, so let's get on to our chapter of memory. So let me give you the definition of memory. Memory is the brain process. The brain process involving encoding. Here, I'll write these words, these bigger words. Encoding, storage, and retrieval. Brain process involving encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean to encode something? What does it mean to encode something?
Is it like what you call it? Putting like processing something and putting it in before it goes into storage, like in your computer. Or programming basically.
Let's start at the bare minimum. Does anybody know what binary code is, which is computer language? Does anybody know what binary code is?
Is that not when the computer is zeros and ones?
Correct. Zeros and ones. So when you type into your computer, you're writing your paper and you hit save. There's a lot of people that think that that paper gets saved exactly the way you typed it in, but it doesn't happen that way. In computer speak, everything gets changed into ones and zeros and gets saved that way. And that's called binary code. Well, the same thing happens with your brain and memory. Your brain changes to a neural pattern, whatever it's trying to remember. So it changes the shape, which is encoding it. It changes the shape of it, which is encoding. It stores it, and then it retrieves it. So retrieval is get it back later, and storage means to retain it, right? So just like your computer does, your brain does very similar ways. So,
Professor?
Yes.
What was it called again?
What?
The term that you're explaining.
Memory. This is the chapter we're on, memory.
Oh, no, on the board. You wrote on the board.
Oh, encoding,
Encoding.
storage, and retrieval. Encoding, storage, and retrieval. Those are
Okay, thank
that's what the brain process does for memory. Okay. So most people think that we have short-term memory and long-term memory, but there's actually something that happens before short-term memory and long-term memory. Who knows what it's called before short-term memory? What kind of memory is before short-term memory?
Sensory.
Sensory, right? Good job. So you actually have three types of memory. You have sensory, short-term, and long-term memory. So let's talk about sensory for a second, because most people don't think about sensory memory. Sensory memory is the fact that you are creating sensory memories like every second. So everything that you're seeing, everything you're hearing, everything you're smelling, everything you're tasting, these are all things that are from your senses, therefore they're sensory, correct? So you are seeing, hearing, tasting, and it's happening constantly. But if you don't do some form of rehearsal, they're gone within seconds. So I just did this with my hands. If you didn't say, oh, let me try to remember that the teacher keeps waving her hands around, that is a sensory memory that's gone. The majority of our sensory memories either have to do with our eyes and our ears. So we have iconic and echoic sensory memories. Which is which? Which is which?
Iconic is your eyes and echoic is your ears.
You are correct. Good job, Sky. Iconic memory are very fleeting visual memories, and echoic is very fleeting auditory memories. So we have these sensory memories, and unless we make some sort of effort, and when I use the word effort, I am talking about some form of rehearsal. When you make that effort to remember something, it's called rehearsal, which for any theater majors here, isn't that right? That's what a rehearsal is. You go through it to try and remember it, right? So any sort of effort to remember something is called a rehearsal. So you have you see something and you're like, oh, I really want to buy that. Let's say somebody's wearing a sweatshirt that you love, and it says pink on it, so you know it's from Victoria's Secret. So you say, oh, I like that sweatshirt. I want to see if they have that in the store. Let me make that effort to try to remember that sweatshirt. If not, it's like every sweatshirt you passed when you were walking through the halls of wherever, but you made that effort to remember that sweatshirt because you like that sweatshirt. So you went, pink sweatshirt. I'm going to try to remember it. You made that effort. You sent it from sensory to short-term memory. Your short-term memory. So sensory is seconds long. Then you did a little bit of rehearsal to remember it. So it went to short-term memory. Your short-term memory is a temporary storehouse that you can remember small amounts of information. You have 30 seconds to do some form of rehearsal from short-term. It'll be gone in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. So you have to do more rehearsal or else it's gone from short-term. So there's a magic number for short-term information. Now, if you guys could turn on your cameras, we're going to do a little bit of a memory exercise here. Turn on your cameras so I can do a memory exercise with you. Hello, pretty faces. All right, here they come. Okay, so there is a magic number in the storehouse, and that magic number is number 7. You have a capacity, the majority of people have a capacity for 7 bits of information in your short-term memory, which is just perfect with remembering a phone number. Think about it. When somebody has a phone number and you're trying to remember it, you can repeat 7 bits of information over and over in your head, and it's somewhat easy, right? It's not terrible. But when you get past 7, a lot of people don't have the capacity to remember stuff. So I want you to put down your pens for half a second. We're going to just use your memory, okay? I am going to write 7 bits of information on my board. And I'm going to ask you to just rehearse it, say it over and over in your head. And then I'm going to take it away. I'm going to ask you to say it. And you probably should do very well with remembering the 7 bits of information. But when I write more than 7, you might end up with a problem. So let's start with the 7, and you should do pretty well. Okay, no pens. You have to do this with your brain. Okay, I'm going to hold it up, and you're going to rehearse it. All right, tell me what the numbers are. Put on your speakers and say it out loud.
956.
956
2173.
2173.
Okay, pretty easy, right? That's what your brain has the capacity. You all got it right. Now I'm going to do more than 7. And what's going to happen for the majority of people is they do great with the first 7, and then it falls off a cliff after 7 because your brain really has the capacity. Now, some people are better. There are some people that will get this whole number 100% because their brain is better at processing those things. And there's some people that will fall off the cliff after 2 because it's like too much information. So let me rate more bits of information, and you'll do the same rehearsal, and let's see how you do. No pencils, just your brain. All right, go ahead. What'd you get?
2, 4, 9.
Yeah, it's not
I only
happening.
remember 249. That's
Wait,
all I remember.
497
keep
I
going.
know it's
156
249.
84357.
Reagan, was that you that got the whole thing?
Yeah.
Say it again. Do you remember it again?
2497 156 84357.
You were close. There was a 684.
Wow.
But come on, give her props. That was pretty good, right? How did the rest of you feel? Like you were going strong in the beginning and then right off the cliff, right? So our brains normally, Reagan, that was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Do you have a very good memory?
Yeah.
So that probably takes the place in a lot of stuff. Where's your shortcoming? You remember stuff, but then just choose not to do things like all parts of your discussion posts, or
I mean, I can remember a lot of things. I have very good memory. I can remember things from when I was like 2. Like I remember my first house. I can remember how many steps there were. There were 13 steps up the staircase.
That's
I can
your
remember-
memory. That's amazing. I mean, it's really amazing. And we know that people have really amazing memories, and the majority of us have just super average memories. And as we get older, they do fail us. But that was pretty amazing. So Reagan had the capacity where the majority of us have these 7 bits that is the norm. And so it doesn't mean that's what the norm is. So we have to do something to remember stuff. Now, I could write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I can write 12 bits of information for the rest of you. Reagan, of course, would remember this, but I can write 12 bits of information, and you would probably have no problem remembering what these are. So we're gonna do this little experiment. Because of the way I'm writing them, I think you'll have no problem with 12 bits of information. So let's try this one. Let's see how you do with this. Okay, ready? No writing down, just remembering. How'd you do? What'd you get?
EDA.
EDA, FLRS,
NJ,
PCA.
Perfect, right? So that was 12. 12 bits, not too hard. Why? Because I grouped them together, and it was things that might have triggered something in your brain that you already learned. And that's called chunking. When you put things together, you group information, and it is able to connect to something that might already be in your long-term memory. NJ was easy. PDA, flowers, maybe you did flowers without some of the letters. The first 3, even if you guessed on BCA, maybe you were saying first 3 letters of the alphabet out of order, something along that lines.
Breast cancer awareness.
What'd you say?
I said breast cancer awareness.
Oh, good, perfect. So
That's easy.
that-
I have a breast cancer tattoo.
that's a memory tool. When you do that, Jake, that's using a memory tool, and that's perfect. And that's how you remember things. You did a connection to something in long-term memory. So you guys, when you do all of this, if you group things together, it's called chunking. And when you do that, that's a memory tool. We're going to talk about a ton of memory tools, but the first one we're going to talk about is the actual type of rehearsals. So there are 2 types of rehearsals that you use. How did you guys learn your multiplication tables?
Myself.
How'd you learn them? You didn't?
Myself.
Is that what I heard? You didn't learn them?
Rehearsing it.
Right. How
Rehearsing
did you
them?
rehearse it? What did you do? What was the rehearsal?
Did a bunch of the same facts over and over again. Yeah, repeating the same facts over and over
Yes.
until you get them down.
Yeah. So the way that you learn, the rehearsal method that you use when you learn your multiplication tables is just the type of repetition, right? So that type of repetition is called maintenance rehearsal. Maintenance rehearsal is just the type of repetition over and over again, like you learned your multiplication tables. It's called maintenance rehearsal. On Saturday Night Live many years ago, Tina Fey was doing Saturday Night Live Weekend Update. And it was right when the Kobe Bryant sexual assault case was out. And Kobe Bryant was accused of raping a young girl. And Kobe Bryant's lawyers released the name of the girl. And it was kind of a bit of a scandal. So Tina Fey, that really kind of pissed off Tina Fey. And so Tina Fey went on Weekend Update and she said, today, Kobe Bryant's lawyers, Schleck and Schleck of Orange, California, released the name of the accuser. Now, I think it's terrible of Schleck and Schleck of Orange, California to do this to this young girl, because if Schleck and Schleck's daughter was raped, would they want their daughter's name out there? So, you know, if you feel strongly about Schleck and Schleck of Orange, California, it would be great if you wrote them a letter or called Schleck and Schleck of Orange, California. And she went on and on. And even though nobody in the viewing audience was trying to remember it, because of the method of maintenance rehearsal during Weekend Update, nobody in that viewing audience didn't remember it because it was said so many times. Now, how many times are you watching a television show and the same, well, you guys watch a lot of Netflix and whatnot, but when you watch shows with commercials, how many times do you go, oh my God, this commercial again? That's not unplanned. The concept is that you see this commercial so many times that it sticks in your brain and you have no way but to remember the product that they're selling because you've heard it and seen it so many times. So there's no mistake there for those annoying repetitive commercials because that's planned. So there's another type of rehearsal, and that is called elaborative rehearsal. So maintenance is that repetition, and elaborative rehearsal. I'm going to give you an example of elaborative rehearsal. I walk into class today and I say, oh, Moaz, what R word? Which R word are you referring to?
Said there was a kid who's like something happened or something like that.
Rehearsal?
No, the kid who was like whose name got like something, who people were saying the kid's name, or
that is the maintenance rehearsal. When Tina Fey was saying the name over and over and over again. That's maintenance rehearsal. Now we're going to do elaborative rehearsal, which is a little different. Did that answer your question?
Kind of.
You're going to do this all in your chapter anyway. So this is just priming you for your chapter. Okay.
Okay.
So if I came into class today and I said, okay, guys, we're going to play the game Sapple. Who knows what we're playing? Has anybody played the game Sapple before?
I never even heard of it.
Okay. So if I say to you, it's like Twister. Do you know what Twister is?
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I say it's like Monopoly, okay? Does everybody know what Monopoly is?
Yeah.
So you are going to have a semi-understanding of this game Sapple that I made up because you can connect it to something in long-term memory. That's what elaborative rehearsal is. It will be something easier to remember because you linked it to something you already had in long-term memory, which Jake did and you guys did when I was asking you to remember more than 7 bits of information. When I chunked that stuff, you were using elaborative rehearsal to remember those 12 bits of information because you already had stuff in long-term memory. So it became easier to remember. This is how you transfer stuff from short-term to long-term memory. You're using these type of rehearsals to get them from short-term to long-term memory. Now, you guys might have heard the word working memory before. Have you heard the term working memory? Have you heard of working memory before?
I've heard it in passing, but I never actually knew what it meant.
Okay, so that's like another name for short-term memory. Short-term memory is one model of memory, and there's another model of memory that has the term working memory similar to short-term memory, though it's about the activity that the brain is doing. Now, everybody has different ways of rehearsing things and memorizing things. Some people can visualize stuff. Like, I don't know, Reagan, if you were visualizing stuff to remember stuff, I don't know what method you used. Was it visualization for yourself? Like you visualized where the numbers were?
Yeah, I'm also pretty good at like, I just see the number and I remember it type thing. I just look at it and I kind of just,
Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Like you just did photographic memory, and we're going to talk about photographic memory. But for instance, my son, when I did his spelling words, you know, he had to learn his spelling words. I would give him a word and he'd say, where is that on the list of words? Is it at the top, the middle, or the bottom? And I would say it's towards the middle. And he'd be able to spell it like that because he visualized the whole words in order, and he was able to spell it that way because he has a very visual memory that way. And some of you might be that way where you remember things by where they are. That's like a visuospatial memory. There are some people that tie things together. You know, there needs to be a beginning, a middle, and end. There are people that, let's say I ask you to go to the store and buy me 4 items. Now, somebody like Reagan, no problem. Somebody like my son is going to have to take a memory of the list. But you might be somebody that has the type of memory where you literally walk the store in your mind. So I say I need milk, bread, peas, and everybody loves chocolate. We'll do milk, bread, peas, and chocolate. So your memory might be that type of person when I say those 4 things, that you literally think about the milk department, the bread department, the canned aisle, and then the chocolate bars. That might be how you have to remember. Everybody's memory is different, but you're going from short term to long term. Any which way you do it is getting that rehearsal done. So let's talk about your long-term memory, which is that giant warehouse where you store information. And it's just not information. It's also skills. You guys have heard that terminology. You can't forget how to ride a bike. You've heard that before? That's because that skill of riding the bike is in your memory. You might be a little rusty about it, but it'll come right back when you go to that long-term memory to remember how to ride that bike. So you have 2 types of long-term memory. 2 types of long-term memory. So when you're writing this on your piece of paper, you got to leave space underneath each of these types because there's types of types. So you have explicit long-term memory and you have implicit. And they're very different. These are your 2 types of long-term memory. You have explicit and implicit memory. Your explicit, the first one, your explicit memory are things you are consciously aware of and that you tried to remember intentionally, which would make your implicit memory what? The opposite, which is what?
Like latent involuntary memory, just
Right.
like things left an impression that you can't forget.
So give me an example. You're right, Lena. what would be something that you're not consciously aware of, that you're not trying to recall?
Well, when you say it like that, it kind of sounds like muscle memory, but we're talking about long-term memory.
But you're not wrong, because those motor skills and habits are implicit memory. So
Yeah.
it could be some type of skill, habit, or action. It could be something that you're not consciously thinking about doing, but you do. How many guys think, when you guys type now, do you guys think about the letters? When
No.
you text or type something, are you thinking about it, or does it just happen?
It just happens.
I
Right.
think about
That is your implicit memory. That's your implicit memory. You just do it. You're not thinking about the skill and doing it that way. When you first started, you did, but then it moved to your long-term memory. So it's no longer something you have to think about. So let's start with explicit. And the explicit is where you're recalling intentionally and you're consciously aware. You have two types of explicit memory. You have semantic and episodic. Semantic and episodic are explicit long-term memory. In semantic, the semantic long-term memory, which is part of explicit, is your encyclopedia of basic knowledge. Days of the week, months of the year, colors of the rainbow. That's just basic knowledge. That is semantic. Episodic is personal events or life events. So Jake had a 6-year-old rodeo birthday party. He remembers being on that horse, wearing his hat and his bandana. That's his episodic explicit memory. You guys don't have that same one, because unless you were at Jake's rodeo, you don't have that. So your episodic are your personal life events that are in long-term memory. So they're part of explicit because there was something you definitely tried to remember. That was the best sixth party I ever had. But they're episodic to you. Now, implicit memory, we talked about it being skills, habits, actions, not conscious, sports typing. It's the term for it is procedural. You have a procedural memory as part of implicit memory, procedural, which are like motor skills and habits. I mentioned to you the bike. You guys go to your parents' house for Thanksgiving. Now, you didn't go last year because of COVID, and maybe you were traveling the world the year before and you haven't been there for like 4 or 5 years. Or let's say you go to a cousin's house that you haven't been to for like 5 years. So you go to their house and they say, let's go outside and let's play some football. And you say, oh, I haven't played football in like 10 years. Oh my God. You get out there and you don't say, okay, I must remember the procedure to throw the ball and then, or catch the ball and run, right? Because you just know how to do that. That's a motor skill or a motor habit. You remember the procedures without having to think about it, right? When you do motor skills and stuff like that, it's called automaticity. That's not a word that you have to write down, but it's just what happens. It's automatic. Your brain does it automatically. So it's called automaticity. when you went driving the last time, I mean, who knows if you leave the house during COVID, but let's say you drove to work yesterday. It's the same place you've worked for a year. Do you go, okay, I'm going to turn on the car and I'm going to make a left at the third corner up there? No, your mind wanders and you just drive there, right? You don't think about it, do you?
No.
Sometimes when you get there, you're like, you don't even remember that you drove. Like you're at work and you like pull in the spot and you're like, wow, I was thinking so hard about something that you don't even remember you drove there and suddenly you're there. Your brain's amazing. That's automaticity. So let me just, before we go on to the next part, I just want you to understand how these stages. So you're trying to remember something. It starts as a sensory memory. It goes to short term. You needed to do some form of rehearsal, right? From sensory to short term. Then you do some form of rehearsal from short term to long term. So let's call this piece of paper the memory. And we want to make sure that this piece of paper is remembered. So I have to do something with this piece of paper to get it into the warehouse. So I walk into the warehouse with this piece of paper and I put it in the inbox of the desk at the warehouse. That's short term. Somebody picks up this piece of paper from the inbox of the warehouse and they bring it to aisle 1, bin 2, file 3, and they put it in the warehouse. So it's in that warehouse, but all of a sudden I need this memory again. So somebody has to go to aisle 1, bin 3, aisle 1, bin 2, file 3, pull this piece of paper out and bring it back to the front desk. So memories go sensory, short-term, long-term, short-term. If we don't do another form of rehearsal, this piece of paper could get lost, right? It could just be gone again because it was left in that in bin at the front of the warehouse, right? So we have to do some form of rehearsal again to get it back into aisle 1, bin 2, file 3. So the way that your memory works is you have it in long-term memory, you bring it up to short-term, but you have to put it back in long-term memory. So you keep doing little rehearsals to bring things back to memory and then put it away again. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you get it? Is there anything you don't understand? Speak now. Get it? Okay, good. All right, so now let's talk about memory aids. When you talk about any memory aid, it's called a mnemonic device, but it's spelled pretty funky. So let me get you this. Any sort of memory aid is a mnemonic device. How did you learn the colors of the rainbow?
Remembering lettering.
Roy
Roy G. Biv, right? Roy G. Biv for the colors of the rainbow. That's a mnemonic device. How did you guys learn your ABCs?
The song.
Right, through a song. Mnemonic device. Who saw the movie House Bunny?
Not me.
You didn't see the movie House Bunny with Anna Faris? Who saw the movie House Bunny?
No.
Nobody? Anybody?
I've seen it.
Okay, so how does she remember people's names?
She makes that funny voice. She goes like, Sky.
So you have the premise of the movie is that a Playboy bunny gets like kicked out of the Playboy mansion, and the only job that she can get is to be a house mother at a university, and she gets the nerd house, for lack of a better word. So you got this Playboy bunny in this house with nerds, but she's not smart. Okay, they make it very clear that she's not the brightest bulb. So one of her memory aids, because she knows she's not smart, is when she meets somebody, she says their name in a very monster voice. So if she met Lena, let's say, she'd go, Lena. Or if she met Hannah, she'd say, Hannah. But that was her memory aid. That any sort of memory aid is a mnemonic device. So that was a mnemonic device, anything that would help her remember stuff. When we just did chunking, when we put those letters together and you remembered 12 bits of information into 4 groupings, that was a mnemonic device. When Jake remembered letters and coded it to long-term information, that was a mnemonic device. Anything where it helps you remember is a mnemonic device. Okay, so let's talk about sleep, because sleep has to do with memory. That's when your brain consolidates all the information that you have done all day long. All day long, your brain is a very patterned brain wave. When you go to bed, and we're going to do a chapter on sleep. I hope we do a chapter on sleep. We talk about how your brain waves look. So you go from a lot of activity to lesser activity to much less activity. During that time, your brain is consolidating, and that's when things are being transferred to long-term memory and being kept there. So sleep is really important to memory. So when we talked to Reagan about how she remembered stuff, she went like this, which meant what?
Like she memorized the site of it instead of the numeric order.
No, she went like this, as if she was taking a picture.
Yeah, so it was like a visual memory.
It is a visual memory, but it's considered a photographic memory, which is something that does exist. Now, very few people in the world have it. Most people have very good memories. And if Reagan truly had what is known as an, oh, it looks like I wrote it there. If Reagan really did have an eidetic memory, photographic, an eidetic memory, she wouldn't have gotten one wrong, because it would have been a photograph in her brain and she wouldn't have missed the 8. So very, 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 very few people in the world have what's known as an eidetic memory, which is a photographic memory. Now, some of us might say, oh, photographic memory would be awesome. But it's actually not fabulous. And I'll read you an article about a woman who doesn't forget. So it says, meet Jill Price at one of her favorite LA restaurants, and she'll scoot into a booth and start to reminisce. On Wednesday, December 11th, 1996, my friend and I came here hunting for the perfect crab cake. She says she also remembers Saturday, November 4th, 1995. She saw on TV that Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was killed on Friday, September 20th, 1985. Her first visit to the eatery, she wore a large hat. It's flashing through my mind, she said matter-of-factly. I'm totally in the moment. I just have a split screen of my past too. Put scientifically, what Price has is the first ever diagnosed case of hyperthymastic syndrome, which allows her, forces her to recall every day of her life from the age of 14. Given a date, she can tell you the day of the week it fell on, what she did, and any historical event she heard of that day. It's like walking around with a video camera, said Price, a school coordinator who chronicles her experience in a memoir, The Woman Who Can't Forget. My memories are nonstop and involuntary and real. So this neurological bio professor at the University of California studied her, and she names things and dates with no errors, he says. So far, MRIs have revealed no sure cause, though part of her brain appears a little larger than normal. Price has her own theory of how this started. It started at 8 when my family moved to California, she said. I held on to everything. I organized memories by date, and it started to feel like a calendar. Her recall fine-tuned itself, she says, until February 8th, 1980. I don't know why, but from that day on, I remember everything. It has been a mixed blessing. Friends rely on her as the keeper of their shared adventures, and I love to see their excitement when I remind them of something, says Price, who also relishes thinking back on good times. I get this warm, rushy feeling. Yet she was only an average student, and the immediacy with which she experiences her past can be agonizing. Her husband, Jim, a mechanic, died from complications related to diabetes in 2005. But to this day, I'm back in the moment. The smell of the hospital, him on the table, she said. It rips my heart out. Her dad says memory takes the edge off of bad experiences. Jill can't. It's hellish. Living with her parents in LA, she meets with researchers who hope studying her can lead to advances in treating memory disorders. I wouldn't want to not have this, she said, but it torments me. It might be a gift for someone else. So here's somebody who has truly an eidetic memory. She was able to train her memory to remember things, but it's also hard to get rid of things that she wants to get rid of, because our brain takes care of us and we have a tendency with time to forget things and suppress things. Hers can't. So it's truly an eidetic memory. Does everybody understand everything that we talked about? So there's one other type of memory I want to discuss, and that is a flashbulb memory. And some of you guys might have a flashbulb memory, and I'll ask you to share with us if you have a flashbulb memory. A flashbulb memory is something that happens to us that is either really, really good or really, really bad. And we are able to remember every little detail involved in it because of our emotions being involved, because it is something so either good or bad. So on the good side, if you get proposed to or you're proposing to somebody, you might remember every little thing about that specific event. You can remember what you were wearing, what she was wearing, what you guys ate, maybe perfume, maybe what the table looked like, or maybe the people around you, the sounds, the smells. That's something really, really good. Or, and I imagine some of you guys might have a flashbulb memory of something really bad, like September 11th, especially if it involved your parents who worked at the towers. So does anybody have a flashbulb memory that they can share with us?
I think our generation remembers where we were when Kobe died.
Okay, so I mean, if it meant something to you, it would. If you weren't, if you hated basketball, you probably wouldn't. But do you remember, Jake, everything about it? Because that's what makes it a flashbulb memory. Now, granted, it wasn't that long ago, but do you remember exactly where you were, what you were wearing, what you heard, saw, smelled, things like
Yep.
that? Was it
Yep, I was working at the waiting room. It was the day of the Pro Bowl. My buddy calls me. He says, "Hey, you want to watch the Pro Bowl?" I was like, "I'm at work." He calls me back not even 5 minutes later. I was like, "What does this guy want from me?" and he told me the news, and I thought my heart stopped. And the rest of the day at work, I'm like, I don't want to be here.
Yep. And that's true. I mean, if that meant to you, I mean, it could be your grandparent, you know, that you're really close to passing away. Does anybody else have a flashbulb memory that they can share with us?
I believe I have one. So a while back, I worked at my father's bodega in New York after schools for some extra pocket cash.
Mhm.
And I was working the lottery machine one day, and there was always this guy who came in regularly and played like over $100 worth of tickets every day regularly.
Right. That's a lot.
And yeah, and I almost always got them right, but occasionally I'd get one wrong. And I put the number in for the ticket wrong, and I printed it out. And I was like, "Hey, do you want this?" And he's like, "Nah, tear it up." It was only worth like $1. So I canceled it, tore it up, and the next day that same number came out for 20 grand.
Oh,
I remember what I was wearing, who I was talking to, the time of day. The only thing I don't remember actually is the number, just because I didn't really look at it at the time.
Right. How did you remember though at the time the number, and when you saw that number, you were like, oh my.
Oh, I didn't remember the number because I didn't really look at it, because he goes through like 100 numbers. I didn't look at the number to begin with, so I didn't really have a memory for it.
Right.
But he remembered the number, and he came back the next day and he was like, "Hey, remember that number from yesterday?" I was like, "Yeah, what about it?" He's like, "It came out for 20 grand.
Oh my God.
That is a flashbulb memory.
Yeah. So you might, that is definitely a flashbulb memory, and you guys might not even have one at this point in your life, but at some point, I imagine you'll have something either really good or really bad. I don't wish really bad on you. I wish really good on you, but you will remember like every little thing about it. And that's why it's called the flashbulb. Now, you know, you guys are getting away, your generation is getting away from the term flashbulb. You know, back when this was coined, there was actually a little bulb on the camera that popped, and it was a bulb and it turned. That's where the term comes from. It's almost an antiquated term nowadays because there's no such thing as a flash bulb, but that's where the terminology comes from. It's as if taking a picture. So maybe down the line, somebody will recoin a term. All right, so let's talk a little bit about remembering and forgetting. But one thing we did not talk about is what part of your brain is responsible for memory. This is super important. Does anybody know what part of the brain is responsible for memory?
Is it the frontal lobe?
It's not. It's a H word.
Hippocampus.
Hippocampus. Good job. Ding,
Oh,
ding,
yeah.
ding. Good, Adrian. Hippocampus is the part of the brain that's responsible for memory. So when we're talking about all of these things, we're going to talk about forgetting too, because this is part of memory, remembering and forgetting. We're talking about the hippocampus when we talk about it. So sometimes you remember things even though you don't remember them. So does anybody here know what they did the first weekend in August in 2010? Can anybody tell me what they did?
I do, because my mom's birthday is in August 2nd, so it was celebrating her birthday. That's all.
Okay, no, but that's exactly what I'm talking about, Adrian. Does anybody else remember what they did the first weekend in August in 2010?
I remember.
Okay, tell me.
So I had just came back from India, and I guess I got like food poisoning, so I was in bed throwing up.
Okay, there you go. Do you really remember? Well, you might remember that, but Adrian, do you really remember that weekend? Or do you remember that you would be celebrating your mother because it's her birthday? And
no, I remember because she, we went out to eat for breakfast. It was her birthday, but she paid. It was strange. I don't know, and then we went back home and we did a barbecue in the backyard.
Well, that's cool. Okay, so you guys are a little bit ahead of the game that you do remember it. The majority of people might remember things by using what's known as retrieval cues. Okay, so usually the answer that I get is, well, we go camping for the month of August every year. So I know I was camping. They didn't remember specifically the first weekend in August in 2010, but since they go camping every August, they would be camping. These are retrieval cues. You don't remember the exact details, but you can use retrieval cues that will help you retrieve some stored information. So there are three memory processes. You have what's known as recall, recognition, and relearning. Recall, recognition, and relearning. When you recall something, it's previously learned information. So you're like filling in the blanks. For recognition, you're doing identification. So that would be if you took a multiple choice test. And relearning is just reacquiring knowledge that you already have. So that would be like taking the class again. So obviously relearning is going to be more accurate than recognition, but recognition is going to be more accurate than recall. So, but these are your three types of remembering. Have you ever walked into the Yankee Candle store in the mall and there's a candle burning and all of a sudden that smell brings up a memory like that for you? Like, let's say they're burning the apple pie candle and all of a sudden you walk in and that smell leads you right to your grandmother. You can picture yourself being in your grandma's kitchen making an apple pie. Does anybody ever have an experience with something like that where a smell triggers a memory big time? Anyone?
Not that I could think of.
Not that you know?
No.
Okay. When some sort of sensory triggers a memory, it's called redintegration. That's what it's called, redintegration. Sometimes, like, let's just say you walked into the classroom. We were at Middlesex, and they have a picture of the boat for semester at sea up on the wall, like they're advertising semester at sea. And you look at that picture and memories flood back to a cruise that you took. You had a blast on a cruise, and just seeing the picture of that boat brings back memories. That's redintegration. Now, redintegration isn't always good. If you were a victim of sexual assault, let's just say, and you are walking on the streets of Manhattan 10 years later, and somebody walks past you wearing the cologne or the smell of the person that sexually assaulted you, all of those horrible memories can come rushing back, and you might just crumble to the floor crying because everything came back to you at that moment. So when we talk about redintegration, it's not
Wait, what does
always.
that mean? What does that mean?
It means when something sensory, a smell, a sight, a sound, triggers a very clear memory. And it could be something good or something bad.
No, like the bad, like the bad thing. What is that?
The smell of the cologne of a sexual assault
Yeah,
might
what is that?
all of that back. That's the redintegration. Some of your memories are mood congruent. So your feelings have to do with your memories. You have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you guys are doing really good. And then your boyfriend or your girlfriend does something wrong and you're really upset. You have this ability, this uncanny ability to remember everything they've ever done wrong. All of a sudden, your memory is mood congruent and you remember everything they've ever done wrong to you. Remember that time 2 years ago when they did such and such. Your memories are mood congruent. So we actually say if you are in a happy relationship and you study for your test, don't get into a fight with your boyfriend or your girlfriend before the test because your memories are very mood congruent. So if you walk into the test and you're pissed and you have anxiety and you're sad, you're not going to remember everything the same way that you were studying for this test in this happy mood. Your memories are mood congruent. It has to do with your feelings. So that's a real thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about forgetting. Are your memories permanent? Are memories permanent?
I feel like some are and some aren't.
Anybody else have an opinion?
No, I agree with her.
Anybody else?
Like certain traumas can be like forever in your mind, but like the errand that I was supposed to run yesterday that I completely forgot about is just gone.
Okay, so when we talk about long-term memory and think about that warehouse where our memories are in aisle 1, bin 2, file 3, right? There's a mouse. There's a mouse in the warehouse and the mouse eats little holes in our memory. So our memories are there, but they're not complete because that mouse has eaten a little hole in this memory that's in aisle 1, bin 2, file 3. So what we have this tendency is to fill those memories. So I can remember driving to Disney World. I have 2 sisters. I was the middle sister. I remember always sitting in the middle, fighting with my sisters, driving the Volare station wagon and driving to Florida to go to Disney World. My mom could come in here right now and say to you, we never drove to Disney World, ever. Did I go to Disney World? Yes, I did. Did we have a Volare station wagon? Yes, we did. Did I fight with my sisters in the car constantly? Yes, we did. But we never drove to Disney World. So all I did was consolidate those memories. We fill in the holes, that we reconfigure those memories. We have this tendency to do that. Now, everybody remembers things based on your own priority. If a gunman were to come in, break into my bedroom right now, stick a gun to my head, and then run out, you all would be interviewed by the police and you would all be asked to account for the gunman, okay? Everybody's accounting would be a little bit different based on your priority. If he was a fairly good-looking guy and you were interested in possibly a fairly good-looking guy, you might say to the police officer, he had nice brown hair and bright blue eyes and, about, 25, 27 years old with a good build. That's your priority. That's what you remember. If you're a gun enthusiast, you might not be able to identify the guy at all because you were only looking at the gun. So you might be able to tell the cops it was a Glock 360 clean with an extra clip. You might be able to report that kind of stuff. Let's say you were a fashion major and that you could identify the Gucci top that this guy was wearing. because you're a fashion major. Whatever your priority is how you're going to remember things. Your memories go by your own priority. So we all can see the same thing, but our priority will change what we remember, which is interesting. It's interesting about all of our memories. Let's talk about forgetting a little bit. So you can have retrieval failures trying to remember stuff. You can have interference remembering things. Do you ever call your new girlfriend by your old girlfriend's name? Oops. You're in a situation where you have some sort of memory interference, where some old memories jump in because they're familiar, and you call your new girlfriend your old girlfriend's name. That's an interference in memory. Sometimes you can't remember old memories. Sometimes you can't remember new memories. Amnesia is loss of memory. That's what the term amnesia means, loss of memory. Most of us, we all have had amnesia, which is called infantile amnesia, where you really don't remember anything before you're 2 years of age. Now you can say to me, but Dawn, I remember getting stitches when I was a year old. Most likely you don't remember getting stitches when you were a year old. Your parents have told you about it enough that you've made a memory, but you probably do not remember getting the stitches. You remember the story about getting the stitches, but you really don't have the memory of that. So the majority of us do not remember stuff before 2, sometimes 3 years of age, and it's infantile amnesia. So every one of you has had amnesia. If you have something that causes amnesia, an incident that causes amnesia, there are 2 types of amnesia. There's retrograde and anterograde. Two types of amnesia, retrograde and anterograde. Retrograde is where you forget anything before the incident that caused amnesia. Forget events of anything before the amnesia, and anterograde is where you forget events after the incident. Antero, after. Anybody see the movie 50 First Dates? Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler. Anybody see 50 First Dates?
Yeah.
So when they go to the psych hospital and they meet 10-second Tom, tell me what 10-second Tom does.
Isn't he constantly forgetting things every 10 seconds? His memory resets?
Yep, exactly. And that's very accurate. So the movie 50 First Dates is not memory accurate. You don't lose a day. You don't go to sleep and your memory resets. That's not how it happens. But in that movie, 10-second Tom is very accurate. Things only get to short-term memory, like we discussed, and he has no avenue to go to long-term memory. So he meets you, he talks to you for about 10 seconds, and then it's gone. And then he acts as if he never met you again. And if you went to a memory ward like that, that is very accurate. That could be somebody who had anterograde amnesia. He had some sort of head trauma where he cannot remember anything after the head trauma. Now, for traumatic brain injury and stuff, I ran a group home for traumatic brain injured adults in Connecticut. And so those kind of people remembered their phone number when they were 5, but would look at a phone now and not know what a phone is because they can't retain those memories. Retrograde amnesia is not being able to remember anything from before the incident of amnesia. I had a student one semester who when we got to this chapter, told us that she was a much older person in the class. She was in her 30s, and she told us that she was a nurse with 2 children and a husband, and she had what is known as a spatial seizure, which means that like there's like an electrical disconnection in your brain, and she woke up with pure amnesia. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know her husband. She didn't know her children. She didn't know the alphabet. She didn't know how to write. She didn't know how to eat. She knew nothing. Now, what was really interesting is that she was at Middlesex County College trying to like regain her life back. She decided, people brought in photo albums and enough information that even though she didn't feel anything, she believed that she was married to the stranger and that these children were hers, but she did not know who they were, or they were strangers. They were complete strangers. She had to learn her whole life back. And so she said she got what are called as sparks. There were little fleeting memories that would come, and she wouldn't remember them, but let's say she'd have a quick memory of like her wedding to the guy, and then it'd be gone. It left her with the feeling that at some point in her life, she loved him. Absolutely crazy. A really, really interesting, like we didn't want it to end. We wanted like class to last like an hour longer just so she could talk to us, because it was really, really, really interesting to meet somebody who had been through that. But I will stop here because your chapter is more about memory, not so much about forgetting. I just want to give you a little insight to that. Any questions? Okay, so you're doing your study plan. The links are in the modules on the screen. So go to week 3. You can do your study plan, you can do your quiz, and then you are going to do the assignment where you are writing a note. You're writing a letter to your friend. Dear so-and-so, I'm sorry you're having a hard time with your class. Here are some things that you're doing wrong. Here are some things I learned in my psychology class about memory that'll help you. 200 to 400 words. Everything is due by Saturday night.
Professor, I have one question.
Yes.
If it's at all possible, can you create a page on Canvas so we can see our grades?
Your grades are there on Canvas.
I can't see them. I can only see them on my phone.
Say that again,
Yeah,
Jake?
there's no page. Like,
I can
you know
only
how
see
on
them
the
on my
side you
phone.
see like assignments, announcements, home, syllabus, and whatever. Grades isn't an option.
Jake,
Yeah,
you
it's
can,
not.
but Jake, you can see it?
Only if you have the Canvas student app on your phone. You can't see
Yeah,
it if
but
you're on a computer.
yeah, and even then it's not grades. It's just like a percentage of where you're at. You can't see what grades go where. Like, you can't see what's submitted, what's late, what's, and whatever else it says. You can't see your weighted grade unless you have the option open on your app. And it's just like a little percentage of where you're at right now.
I'll have to check with the department. I don't do that. In your other classes, do the teachers enable something for that?
I have no idea how it works. I think if you talk to IT, they'll set it up for you because there is a grade. So clearly, if you put it in, it receives it. And
Yeah, I
sometimes
put everything in. I do everything on Sunday and it's in there. And last semester, again, this is all new. We started this last semester, but nobody had a problem seeing it last semester. And I didn't do anything different this semester.
Oh, I don't know, but it's definitely not there.
All right, I'll talk to the department and see if I didn't enable something, but I did exactly what I did last semester, and it should be, I can see them.
It's not like bad per se. It's just convenient to have it. So if you have the time and time to set it up, that'd be nice.
My problem, I'll definitely look, but if I enable it on my end as a teacher, then you can see everybody's grade, which can't happen. I can't hit
enable. See everyone's grade. We can only see our own grades.
Say that one more time.
We wouldn't be able to see everyone's grade, just their own grades.
Not
like assignment grade.
Not in my
No.
view. I'm saying if I enable my view, you would see everybody because I see everybody. So I've got to find out what to do to make it so that you can see yours.
Yeah, it's a normal page on most other classes. Well, it's just your assignment and then the grade that went with it, your assignment and the grade that you got for it.
Okay. I will ask Crystal to look and see what's enabled and what's not enabled for me.
All right,
I'll
thank
do
you.
that. Okay. Everybody have a good week.
You too. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Sager or Hagar, need anything?